Hi, I'm Noam Wasserman, Dean of the SciSim School of Business at Yeshiva University. I was a longtime professor at Harvard Business School, an entrepreneur, and a venture capitalist. I wrote the bestseller, The Founder's Dilemmas.
And I'm Charlie Harary. I've been working with companies for over 10 years. And that book, The Founder's Dilemmas, and the challenges faced by the 10,000 founders in it is the basis of this podcast. We are delving into the issues faced by startups to help you avoid the pitfalls that claim so many good companies.
Let's get started.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Charlie Harary here, Founders Dilemmas podcast. I'm here with Dean Wasserman. We're going to hit we usually hit timeless lessons when it comes to founding and corporate success. But here we're going to actually talk about things that are happening in the news today. And one of the things that are rocking the headlines is FTX. So Dean, let's talk about that. What do you have for us today?
Okay, no, absolutely, Charlie. Thank you. Great to see you again. Just like with a question that I had gotten about Elon Musk and Twitter that we're tackling in another episode, this was a question that came from the press rather than from our listeners. We'll get back into listener questions in our next episode. This actually came from someone at Harvard Business Review who wanted to get my perspective on FTX. And so just to set the table a little bit so people can understand what is going on there. FTX is a cryptocurrency exchange. It was founded by someone named Sam Bankman-Fried back in 2019, so it's about 3 years old. At its peak a year ago, it had 1 million users and was the third largest crypto exchange by volume. Major new industry, major growth, and this was one of the pioneers in it. And in January of this year, of 2022, it was valued at $32 billion. And so this was a major starship, major comet that was streaking across the sky. However, November 11th, it is now in bankruptcy proceedings. Major liquidity crisis that they faced. It's had major ripples on that industry, all sorts of ways in which it has lost some major money for the people invested in, but also repercussions for overall cryptocurrency as a concept, as an industry, and things like that. And so let's take a look at that through our lens, through the Founders Dilemmas. When I was thinking about it after getting the email about it from the Harvard Business Review editor, it represented in a lot of ways the timely version of the timeless lessons that we've been talking about. There's so many things in it. They're just classic founder pitfalls that we have covered, but let's look at it through this mini case study. There's actually one that I'll start off with that's a little bit of an addition to it. We had talked about when to found, what to found, how to found, things like that. One of the red flags that should have been on people's radar, and the other red flags we're going to talk about will be echoes of lots of the other things we've covered in other episodes, but a new red flag is where to found. A very interesting thing when a founder, and let's go back into the concept of rich versus king. The founder wanting to keep control, the king, the monarch on the throne, and where because of that, you typically harm the value of what you are growing. Whether it's in the short term you're harming it, there's often that, but also in the long term, even if initially it looks like you're doing great as that king on the throne, in the longer run, it's major risks that it's injecting into the company. And that's what the case was here. The first of the red flags that I would have pointed to was they decided to incorporate to be located in the Bahamas. Why was that? Because the Bahamas allows lax governance. You can get away with not having a board of directors. You can get away with no audits, really. And right there's all sorts of things that you should be asking about the founder, his motivations, and the way in which it's going to be unchecked, undisciplined, all the things that founder is doing. A 20s founder, a young person, very inexperienced when it comes to a lot of these things. There was an ABC story that I think encapsulated this part of it very well. The ABC story said, in 2021, the company moved to the Bahamas seeking a favorable regulatory environment. Sounds great on its own, but if you think about what we've covered with founders keeping control, with the monarch on the throne, there's all sorts of things in terms of, I think we had talked about that monarchy is a terrific model as long as the monarch is infallible, and none of us are infallible. And unfortunately, when the founder even gets it into his head that he is infallible, that makes it even more likely that there's going to be the pitfalls that he's going to step into. And so that's the first of them about the favorable regulatory environment means undisciplined founder, no checks on him, and he's going to be able to do all sorts of stuff that people are probably going to regret.
Yeah. I think this is a greater issue, and I think talking about it, I think is important for people that are in the world of investments. Like you said, just think about this story, right? In 2019, it was founded. What was the valuation in 2021? You said
32 billion.
Just think about what kind of appreciation that is, right? A 20-something-year-old founder in a non-regulatory environment, like it's easy for people to get caught up in a world that is just really just value appreciation versus value creation. And I think it's hard to not get in this space. I know crypto is it's a controversial word now, but if you were watching the Super Bowl and every ad was crypto, and crypto, whoever did the media for crypto was brilliant. I don't know if you saw the Larry David ad. Do you remember the Larry David ad?
I don't have a TV at home, so I wouldn't be able to watch the Super Bowl.
No,
I heard about the ad.
Right.
I heard about it.
Right. Thank God I don't either. And I was, we went to the Super Bowl party, and a buddy of mine, everyone was there, and there was this ad, and it's such an important ad in general. And I want to just spend a minute on it because people that are listening that invest, you have to hear this. There was an ad where Larry David is the character that's always the naysayer. Right, he's in a situation where they make a wheel and he goes, "That's never going to work." And then he's in the situation where like they look at the sun, it's crazy. The Earth is flat, and every time there's an invention and a breakthrough, Larry David's in a new outfit, being the naysayer. And then the last scene, if I remember this correctly, is he's at an office. Someone goes crypto, and he goes, "That's never going to work." Right? Trust me, I got my instincts on this. And I'm watching this and going, this is like, Daniel Kahneman 101, right? This is risk aversion, right? People are scared to lose. So if you want them to do something, present a way that they're going to lose out, play the negative. And that's what it was. You're going to miss the next big thing. And when you play the psychological game right, the masses follow. And so you have this world of cryptocurrency that's really a game of appreciation. It's not value creation. There's no product. Nothing's coming off the factory line. Right? There's a currency that has an appreciation value, and the appreciation is based on demand. And you look at this, and if you look back and you ask yourself, how does something go from non-existence of value to multiple billions and billions of dollars within moments? And now it all comes crashing down. And I think it's such an important lesson of this idea of this is like a microcosm, if you will, of what happens all the time. Of this rush to find something that's going to give me some return or some value without the underlying diligence of the creation that takes place. And you get swept up in this, and this idea that there could be a 20-year-old, because we've seen enough pictures of 20-year-olds on the front of Inc. magazine that could lead the charge to the future. And if you're not in, you're outdated. Right? This whole thing sort of speaks to all the things that are scary about the investment world and the world that we're living in today, that I think has tons and tons of lessons in it.
Yeah, so you're talking about another human bias that we can add to the list of the ones that we've gone throughout our time together. The bias towards passion being an all upside, persistence all being good, of the risk aversion, the avoidance of difficult conversations, that are all of these human biases. Right. You're hitting on the FOMO effect, the fear of missing out, and how that gets people to not be thinking as deeply as they should about potential red flags, because I'm going to miss out, and the downside of that. And that in particular, that's something that hot founders like to spark for investors. Have the investor fear that, and a lot of venture capital sites have what they call the anti-portfolio page. Bessemer, I think, was the first who might have started with that. These are the ones that they actually like to see it as bringing transparency. I think it's also, there's a little bit of humility in it, but there's also a little bit of, these people were coming to us and wanted us. These are the deals that I turned thumbs down on that turned out big. That's right. What you'll see on the anti-portfolio pages. They would prefer that every single one of those deals they had said yes. And it's a reminder to them about that FOMO. It's accentuating like the FOMO effect when it comes to this. But an interesting thing when it comes to FTX, they did try to spark that with investors and did get some very high-profile investors. But there's also a bunch of investors who hiccuped at the lack of governance there. This is the next thing that we can get into. And when it comes to like some of the fundamentals around the rich versus king and the founder's dilemma stuff that we've been talking about, they avoided the investors who would tighten the discipline. There were investors who said that you right now don't have a board of directors because you can get away with it in the Bahamas. We will not invest unless you create a board of directors. And
Yep.
so they instead took the investors who were saying that they were fine essentially with the lax governance. They didn't have a board until under pressure just a few months ago, January 2022, that they had to create a board of directors at that point. That was when they were already, close to $32 billion that they were valued, and they still didn't have a fundamental governance body called a board of directors. And then when they went and created it, January 2022, they had 9 people they put on the board. 5 of them were insiders. So the majority of the board is all in the back pocket of the founders who want to do anything. It's a board only it's a facade board. Yep. It is a board only symbolically. And so that's where another one of the fundamentals that we've talked about, with being able to have the checks and balances, the investors overlooking their investment, being able to have the oversight that they really have a fiduciary duty, a legal duty to their investors to have, making sure that their investment isn't in danger, and the billions of dollars that were going into this, that there are all sorts of ways that that's not going to be endangered, where it's their responsibility to have those controls. But the FOMO and the other dynamics of it led to that. There's a couple of quotes for you on this front. They brought in a new CEO just like in the last week. He actually was the one who, interesting background, he was the one who steered Enron out of bankruptcy. And he was commenting about how this was even worse than Enron. They had never seen such a complete failure of corporate controls, including what he saw at Enron, the iconic disaster that was of this ilk from about 20 years ago. They were diverting corporate funds to purchase homes for employees in the Bahamas. The new management is not even able to tell right now how much cash is on board. They know in general we're going to need about $8 billion. They have a shortfall right now. They think they might have $500 million, but they really can't even put their finger on the easiest thing that you should be able to have of what is the cash on board. And so all sorts of ways, and it's actually a little bit ironic because there's the founders who talk a good game, and then there's the ones where you have to peel back and be able to really see it. Bankman-Fried, that founder CEO, he had built a reputation as an advocate for greater regulatory oversight in the industry.
Right.
He became very prominent saying crypto needs more oversight and things like that. Now he's admitting, the admitted to a reporter, that was just PR. And he was not serious at all about it. It was all just surface.
Didn't he just pull out 300 million? Was that right? Didn't he sell down 300 million of his own shares or stock before this all went down? Did you hear
It's
that?
interesting. It's possible I might have missed that detail. What I did see is that before he was worth about 20 billion and now he's worth 0. So I think if he would have pulled that out, they wouldn't have said that he was worth 0. It's very possible that even if he had done it, this is now coming up in the U.S. court system. If this had been like illicit, like the equivalent of insider trading, because he knew that these kinds of things were coming, even if he was able to sell that out, it's very possible the court would have taken it back from him. So either way, he's pretty much wiped out, and that's just at the founder level being wiped out. There's so many others we'll talk about the employees, the investors, even the industry, how this has been a wipeout in a major way at billions of dollars.
This has so many lessons for founders, for investors, the chase, the run, the hype versus the discipline. And you have to balance it. You have to know when to ride the passion, right? You have to know when it's your moment and everyone's excited and you got to hit the road and raise your money or go out and sell your product. And as the market turns in your favor, you got to know how to take advantage. But also you have to have that discipline. And it's so hard for people when the money is coming in or when the investment looks good to not just to allow the bias. You know, as you look at great investors, as you watch them over the course of their lives, as you look at great CEOs, I think you see the same thing again and again. You see, like you said, a level of discipline, a level of patience, to playing the long game. And this happens in everything in life. But I think this is such a great example of the long game, of making sure your team is right so that you know what's going on with your books. The long game, constantly sort of like measuring and honing in on the passion so that you're doing the right thing and that you're investing in the right thing. And these are the things that I think these are great moments for the larger community if we're paying attention. You know, whenever you see this is like a major crash, God forbid, on the highway. Everyone loves to turn, like, this is like rubbernecking 101. Who doesn't love to watch this guy go down and watch Elon Musk fire a million people? Like, but when you're, if you're an investor or you're a founder or you're anybody trying to build something, these are such incredible moments to like take a deep breath and allow someone else's experience to be the basis of your wisdom, and remind you that you and I are filled with bias. And if you don't have the right discipline and slow down and do things you don't want to do sometimes, that stuff may blow up. And it may not be on the cover of the paper, but it may be equally devastating to one's life.
Yeah, no, there are reasons that society has developed best practices around where we should put constraints, where we should allow the entrepreneurial juices to flow. Once in a while, they're off, but Eric Claw, in general, there is wisdom that underlies those best practices. Most of the laws that have developed over the centuries, a lot of the best practices around startups, boards, audits, controls, and things like that, that even though a founder might chafe at it initially, you have to have that longer term picture that you're talking about to appreciate the wisdom in them and the way in which this is going to be a little bit of a safety net for me to be able to make sure that I'm inviting in when my passion is going to make me look only at the short term and think that this is the long term is good. You have to be able to have those people on board to be able to do it. One final one in terms of some of the things that we've covered that this is a classic example of, bringing friends into the venture, hiring friends.
Right.
This is to show that it's not just FTX, this is what they did over there. But it was interesting. I was looking back at some of the past stories, and I actually found one from Quartz back in 2020 that quoted me on the problems with the WeWork founder, with Adam Neumann. Just to show this is back then, this is true. What's going forward, it's going to be other ones that are going to be facing it, but that this is timeless, and this is not just FTX with it. The quote that he had for me there, it's one that we already talked about in the first half of it. There's an old saying, monarchy is the greatest method of decision-making in the world, as long as the monarch is infallible. Recent history shows that even the most iconic founder is far from infallible, especially if their control is unchecked. Then I was talking about WeWork, Adam Neumann, but we can apply it on a regular basis to these monarchs within there. WeWork badly needed someone to check Newman's excesses, but arguably the second most influential person within the company was Rebecca Neumann, senior executive, and his wife. This is looking for it when you're talking about having a real person who's going to be the Azer Kenegdo, the pushback, being able to really help you by having you see where do you have to be more disciplined, where do you need constraints, when that's the kind of thing that you're building, whether you're FTX or whether you're WeWork. It's all sorts of issues that are going to be introduced by that.
It's amazing the more we think about it. We say that Moshe was, our great. He was the closest thing we had to like the real king. I'm saying he was considered like a king, right? And when God describes him, he doesn't speak about him through his charisma or through his wisdom, of which he had a lot of, through his strength, his resilience. Like, name a trait, Moses dominated it. The trait that God speaks to him about is humility. And now as you see the timeless wisdom of the Torah, and that look at these, so to speak, modern day kings. Like, if you think about a king in antiquity, they were less powerful than Adam Neumann. They were less powerful than a billionaire. Like, they ran, kings ran some probably, today they're mayors, I'm saying? They ran small neighborhoods, which didn't have like plumbing, I'm saying? But think about a billionaire today and the level of power they have, and especially the power they have of their company, right? I always say that today the only thing that we have left in kings really are CEOs, are company CEOs. Because if those who work in a corporation, CEO walks the hallway. If he's if it's a private company, he does whatever he wants. And now we're seeing again and again and again this wisdom of the Torah, that the thing you should look for when you're trying to back, whether as an employee or as an investor, a CEO, a modern day corporate king, is humility. Because if they're not humble people, they're not going to surround themselves with people that can challenge them. They're not going to take the lessons that are coming in from the market. And ultimately, arrogant CEOs will fail. It's just a constant that we see again and again. And we're just seeing it again. Like, this is just another version of the same timeless lesson that we just got to keep on learning, that we don't. Because whatever the next hype is, we think this person's going to take us to the promised land, and they never do if they don't have the right traits.
Yeah, there's a puzzle that I've observed that maybe you've cracked it better than I can, or I'm sure there are lots of other smarter people than me who can crack it. when people rise up in the corporate realm, there tends to be a little bit more of the confidence that comes, a little bit more bordering on arrogance as they get higher and higher up in it. If you take a look at the great rabbis, the higher and higher up they get in people's esteem, the more humble they get.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to put my finger on that, but you look at Rav Herschel Schachter, who like sits right by me in the YU in the base matters in the big the big learning room in there. He is an almost unanimous Gadol Hador, one of the top people in the world, the most humble guy that you can imagine.
Yeah.
He would never imagine that anyone would call him that that great or anything like that. You had Ramosha Feinstein Zatzal from the Last Generation. There's stories about him where he'd be walking down the street in Brooklyn and there'd be a ball bouncing by that the students said he would pick up the ball, he'd throw it to the kids. There was another time that one kid was calling to his other friend Moshe, that happened to be the first name of Moshe Feinstein. He answered because he didn't think anything of a kid calling him by his first name. And so as they rise up, for some reason, that Torah depth and the learning instills in it that humility that you're talking about, that Moses had. But I haven't put my finger on exactly why it leads in opposite directions from the corporate.
Can I take a shot?
Yeah, please.
It's subject matter. Meaning, when you're engaged in spiritual pursuits, the spiritual world is an unending, incredible world in which God is in the middle of it. And so as you achieve success, you realize how little you really are, because the physical world around you starts to pale in comparison to the spiritual world in front of you. So as you engaged in Torah and you engaged in things that are spiritual in nature, you realize that you're really tiny. And that ability to be fully satisfied with self because you're filling yourself up spiritually, and the recognition how small you are, has you realize that you really don't have much. But if you're playing in the physical world without any spirituality, you think the game is just physical things. And as you achieve physical success, you get lost and drunk that this is the world around you. And so exactly, when you see people that are spiritually minded, the more they're successful, the smaller they are, because they look around and go, you guys are crazy. Do you have any idea what I'm engaged in? I'm a speck in the dust of the divine. But you see some dude that starts an exchange based on basically just appreciation, grows into a paper billionaire company. He thinks he's the man because he's measuring his success based on stuff. And he has more stuff than other people. And everybody wants stuff. So there's always a cacophony, right, of people saying, you're the greatest thing in the world. And I think that's exactly, if you weigh, that's the trigger. And I think this applies in life, which is when you have a life that does not have spirituality, you fall into the trap door. Even if you're not a billionaire, you think you got it. You place basketball than the next guy next to you. You just make $10 more, but your home's the biggest on the block, right? Whatever the little thing is that in your context is more than the guy next to you. If you're physically minded, you are playing a game that you can touch, and you think you're winning. But the minute you become spiritually minded, the physical things that you have really pale in comparison to the spiritual mission you're on. And you can then maintain lots and lots of physical things. In the old days, the Tanaim and the Moraim, some of them were incredibly wealthy. And you never see in an exchange in the Talmud, they drop that. They like, by the way, just letting you know, do you know who you're talking to? Saying like, it's because physical things in a context of spirituality have its place. And I think that's exactly what we see. If we're living in a world that is physical for physical sake, and as a result, we're constantly seeing the kings get dropped. And the more people expose themselves to a world where it's physical but for spiritual sake, the more you're able to have it all. And I think when you look at real Gedolim, they're just so far ahead of the rest of us that they live it so inside, and that's my, I'm just taking a shot at it just for.
No, absolutely. So you're bringing to mind the last page of Tractate Sota. It talks there about when all-time great Rebbe, who was the richest of the generation, but also the greatest when it came to the all the things that went into setting the table for Judaism today. The one who formulated the Mishnah and other things that were very much like era-making successes that he had, said that when he passed away, humility died. And the greatest one-liner, I think, from across all of the Talmud then follows the next one. Humility died when Rebbe died. And then Rav Yosef jumps up and says, no, I'm still here. It's like a drop the mic line and stuff like that. So what does that mean? Like, this seems to be the most ironic of lines there. Rav Aryeh Leibowitz, who's the head of the Smicha program here at YU now, a close colleague of mine, when he was giving the class on that daf, on that page, what he suggested is something that now I've seen recurringly, like there's other pieces in the puzzle we can put, but he suggested the initial take at it. Rav Yosef actually got hit by an illness later on in life that made him blind and also gave him a little bit of amnesia. This is something that the first daf of Ksubas talks about, the illness that he has. There's all sorts of echoes that we can see across all of Shas about it. What did Rav Yosef mean at that point? My being here is showing everyone that everything that we get comes from Hashem, comes from God, and that it can go in a second.
Wow.
The fact that I lost it, he was known for knowing all of the Torah. The end of Brachos, he is Sinai. He is the all-encompassing knowledge of the entire Torah. And even he got hit with amnesia. He lost it. That if I am still here, then everyone is able to see that it is not us. Any blessing that we have, any major way in which we have what we think is our talent, it all comes from above, and we can lose it in a minute. That's why we have to have the humility of realizing that it all is not us. And so it's another one of the reinforcements that you were bringing to mind with it.
Wonderful. Okay, everybody, if anybody has any questions for us, it's foundersdilemmaspodcast@gmail.com, foundersdilemmaspodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to seeing you next time. Maybe we'll get back to some of the usual broadcasting that we do, or maybe we'll hit some of the more timely lessons. But please reach out to us. Let us know what you'd like for us to discuss, if there are questions that you have. And as always, Dean, it's an honor to be with you, and looking forward to next time.
Likewise.